Ever wondered like why a digital encyclopedia, one of those ones just packed with info, could be sold for a fraction of the price of like those massive book versions?
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? It all comes down to how information works in the digital age. I
Yeah.
guess, I mean, its value doesn't really disappear when you make more copies like physical stuff does, right?
Right. Today we're diving into this whole world of information economics with Shapiro and Varian's information rules. It's really a fascinating look at the digital economy. Like we'll be looking at why some companies just give their product away for free. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Giving away something you've worked hard on. And how does free even factor into a business strategy?
Well, it's interesting because the book doesn't just like throw out all the traditional economic ideas. It actually suggests this new way of looking at things, applying those old rules to the digital world in new and innovative ways.
So we're kind of like writing a digital addendum to the economic rule book. I like it.
Exactly.
The book uses Encyclopedia Britannica as an example. They were like the kings of information for so long with those huge, impressive books. Then CD-ROMs came along.
And that's a perfect example of the challenges of selling information in the digital age.
Yeah, even though the info on the CDs was the same as in their expensive books, Britannica couldn't really charge the same price for both.
That's because of something Shapiro and Varian call out. The cost of making information is mostly upfront. The research, the writing, editing, that's what's expensive. But making copies after that, whether it's a physical book or a CD, is super cheap.
So that old cost-plus pricing model goes out the window then, I guess. You can't just tack on a markup when it practically costs you nothing to make another copy. It becomes about how much value the customer thinks it has, and that's a whole other ballgame.
Exactly. And that's where strategy comes in. Since it's so easy to copy information to intellectual property rights, well, they're important, but they're more like guidelines in the digital world.
Almost like trying to contain the wind. The book actually talks about managing intellectual property, not just protecting it. What are some ways companies actually do that?
Think about free samples. You give them away so people try it and hopefully like it enough to buy the full version.
Mhm.
Or you bundle products and services together. You have to find creative ways to make the most of your info, even if you can't control every single copy that's out there.
Like when computer stores were practically giving away Microsoft Encarta to compete with Britannica's CD-ROM.
Exactly. It seems counterintuitive, right, to undercut your own product like that. But in the information world, it's a way to grab attention and get a foothold in the market.
It's a whole different way of thinking about things. Speaking of different ways of thinking, the book also dives into lock-in, which sounds kind of scary, honestly.
It can be, but it's not always a bad thing. Lock-in is basically when switching to something else, even if it's better or cheaper, is just too much of a hassle. The QWERTY keyboard is a classic example.
Oh man, why are we still using that layout? It's like it's designed to be inefficient.
You're not wrong. Studies actually show that there are better keyboard layouts out there. But QWERTY won out because of historical reasons. People learned it, typists were trained on it, companies didn't want to retrain everyone. It was just too expensive to switch, even if the alternative was better.
So we're stuck with a less than ideal keyboard because of, well, market inertia. That's both fascinating and a little depressing. But as the book says, this lock-in thing happens everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Think about software. You get used to a program, you store all your files in that format, maybe even paid for training. Switching to something new, even if it has better features, can be a pain.
And companies know this, right? They're not just accidentally making it hard to switch. It's a strategy.
It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's about making sure things work well together or building customer loyalty.
Mm.
But it's definitely something to be aware of, both as a consumer and someone who might create information themselves. And, it's not just like individual users who run into this lock-in thing. Companies can get locked in, too, to systems or software they're using, or even relationships with suppliers.
Whoa. So it's a way bigger deal than just me deciding if I want to try a different word processor.
Yeah, exactly. The book uses the example of Bell Atlantic. They were locked into using AT&T switches because of their initial investment in that infrastructure. Imagine having to switch to a competitor even if a better option came along. The cost, the disruption.
It'd be like being held hostage by your own past choices.
Pretty much.
But knowing this is like having some secret knowledge. If you know about these switching costs ahead of time, you could use them to your advantage. Or avoid them altogether.
Exactly. That's the beauty of understanding these concepts. Ready to unlock another piece of this information economics puzzle.
Hit me with it. I'm ready to have my mind blown again.
Okay, let's talk about network effects. This is the idea that the more people use something, the more valuable it becomes.
Oh yeah, I get that one. Social media is like the perfect example. Facebook with just 2 people on it is pointless. But with billions of users, it's the place to be.
Right. But here's what's even more interesting. The book makes the point that network effects aren't just limited to the online world. They can pop up in some pretty surprising places. Think back to before the internet was everywhere. Fax machines.
Fax machines. Okay, you're going to have to explain this one.
So back then, having a fax machine was a novelty. You could really only send faxes to the few people you knew who had one. But as more and more people got them, the network became more valuable. It created this positive feedback loop where suddenly everyone needed a fax machine.
Wow. I never thought of a fax machine as being part of a network, but it makes total sense. The more people using it, the more useful it became for everyone else. What's interesting, though, is that this completely changes how you would market something like a fax machine compared to a traditional product.
Right. And these positive feedback loops can cause the market to shift really, really quickly.
So you're saying one product or standard could just take over and leave the competition in the dust?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Betamax versus VHS.
Exactly. Shapiro and Varian call this igniting positive feedback. And they talk about several strategies companies use to make it happen.
Okay, lay it on me. How do they make it happen?
One way is what they call the performance play. Basically, you just make your product so good, so game-changing that people are naturally drawn to it, even if it doesn't work with existing systems at first.
So it's like the build it and they will come approach,
Right.
but for technology. Bold. What else?
Then there's controlled migration. This is where you're basically trying to improve existing tech. You keep some compatibility to make it easier for people to switch over, but you're still offering big improvements.
Less flashy maybe, but definitely a smart move.
There's also open migration, which is similar to controlled migration, but you make your tech open for others to use and build on.
A rising tide lifts all boats. Got it.
Exactly. And lastly, you have discontinuity. This is the riskiest one, where you introduce a completely new and better technology and try to convince everyone to jump ship.
Risky, but big reward if you can pull it off. These are all really interesting strategies, but it seems like choosing the right one would depend on a lot of different factors.
You're absolutely right. The book really stresses that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. You got to think strategically and consider these network effects and, of course, manage those pesky switching costs.
It all comes back to that.
Yeah.
So we've got information being different from physical goods, lock-in network effects, and it gets even more interesting. What happens when all these things collide?
That brings us to another fascinating aspect of the information economy: standards wars.
Standards wars. Now that sounds intense. Tell me more.
Oh, they can be brutal. Basically, you have a standards war when you've got two or more technologies that aren't compatible, and they're all fighting to be the dominant one. Think back to Betamax and VHS.
Oh yeah, VHS definitely won that one. Poor Betamax, relegated to the tech graveyard.
It's a classic example for sure. But there are tons of others throughout history. The battle between AC and DC, current the fight for browser supremacy, even the competition in the smartphone market. These wars are expensive and hard-fought, and they can have a lasting impact on entire industries.
So it's more than just building a cool product. You've got to outsmart your rivals and convince everyone that your tech is the one to back.
Exactly. And information rules gets into the nitty-gritty of the tactics companies use in these wars. We're talking about things like really aggressive pricing strategies, forming strategic alliances, and even something as subtle as shaping how customers think about things.
Shaping customer expectations. What does that even look like?
Think about those super calculated product announcements that get everyone hyped up. You know, they're playing up new features and kind of creating this feeling that their technology is inevitable, like it's the future and everyone knows it. It's all about building confidence in consumers, making them feel like they're making the right choice even before there's a clear winner.
So you need cutting-edge tech and some good old-fashioned marketing magic. And it sounds like the stakes are high. Winning one of these standards wars could make or break a company.
Absolutely. The winner usually ends up with the majority of the market, and the loser, well, they often fade into obscurity. The book talks about some really interesting historical examples of this, like the Battle of the Currents, Thomas Edison's DC system versus George Westinghouse's AC system.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one. Didn't Edison try some pretty unorthodox methods to make AC current look bad?
He did. Even though Edison was a brilliant inventor, he really didn't like AC current. He went so far as to publicly electrocute animals with it to try and show how dangerous it was.
That's the next level smear campaign right there. Kind of ironic considering how innovative he was in other areas.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It just goes to show that even geniuses can be afraid of change. But in the end, AC current won out because it was just better at transmitting electricity over long distances. It was a victory for superior technology, but also for Westinghouse's strategic thinking. He was great at making alliances and navigating the political world, which turned out to be super important for his win.
That's a good reminder that it's not always about the tech itself. It's about the whole package, the strategy, the
Right.
people you work with, the marketing, even dealing with politics. Those things can be just as crucial as the innovation itself.
Exactly. And these lessons from history, they still matter today. Just look at the battles we're seeing in things like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and the metaverse.
It makes you wonder who's going to come out on top in those arenas. Speaking of the future, the book also talks about how governments are involved in this whole evolving information economy. It's not just it's a free-for-all out there, right?
Not at all. Information Rules argues that any company working with information needs to understand the rules of the game. Things like antitrust laws and intellectual property rights, those are crucial.
So you can't just be a tech genius. You need to be a legal eagle, too. It's amazing how connected everything is, from tech and economics to law and government policy. It's a lot to process.
I know. And it really makes you think about the decisions we make as consumers.
That's what I was just thinking. We've talked about how information is different from physical goods, the impact of lock-in those powerful network effects, and even those high-stakes standards wars. But how does it all relate back to us, the everyday people trying to navigate this sea of information?
That's where the book gets really interesting. It wants us to look beyond just the price of something and think about the bigger picture, the long-term consequences of our choices as consumers.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's say I'm trying to pick out a new smartphone.
Yeah.
It's not just about which one has the coolest features or the best camera anymore, right?
Nope. Now you've got to think about those lock-in effects. What operating system does it use? How easy is it going to be to switch all my stuff over if I get a different brand later? Does the company even support their older devices? These are things most people don't even consider.
It's like there's this whole hidden layer of costs and things to think about that you don't even see because you're caught up in the excitement of a shiny new gadget. But knowing about them feels like having a secret weapon.
It is. And it's not just gadgets. Think about software online services, even those loyalty programs. They can all subtly lock you in and influence your decisions for years to come.
So what you're saying is knowledge is power. The more we get this stuff, the better choices we can make for ourselves in the long run.
Absolutely. The book makes a really important point. We have to be more aware of how much companies are constantly competing for our attention. In the world of information, attention is a valuable commodity.
So true. I feel like I'm drowning in ads and notifications and clickbait headlines. It's overwhelming.
And companies are only getting better at grabbing and profiting from our attention. They're using our data to personalize everything, target us with specific messages, even design experiences that keep us coming back for more.
That's impressive on a technical level, I guess, but
Mhm.
also kind of creepy when you really think about it.
Yeah, it can be. But the point of information rules is to wake us up to these tactics.
Yeah.
We have a choice. We can either let ourselves be swept along by this constant flow of information, or we can be more deliberate about what we let into our lives.
I like that, being more deliberate. It's like we're curating our own information diets, being mindful about what we consume, just like being surrounded by unhealthy food options. We can choose to eat healthy even when it's everywhere.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of the most important takeaways from the book. The future of information is going to be personalized.
Personalized information. What does that even look like in real life?
It means companies using all that data they have to tailor what they offer to each person. We're already seeing it with those personalized suggestions on Netflix and targeted ads on social media, but it's going to get a lot more personalized than that.
That's exciting in a way, but also a little scary. It makes you think about that trade-off between convenience and privacy.
That's the balance we're all going to have to figure out as this personalized information landscape keeps evolving.
It definitely gives us a lot to think about. This whole deep dive has really changed how I see the digital world. It's like I'm starting to see the matrix.
That's exactly what Information Rules
Yes.
wants to do. It wants to give people the knowledge to understand the forces shaping this information age and how we all fit into it.
I like that. Well said. So as we wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway, the final thought you want to leave our listeners with today?
Information rules are shaping our world, and it's up to all of us to be active participants in that, not just passive consumers. We have to understand what's going on, make informed choices, and demand a digital world that works for us, not against us.
It's a call to action for the digital age. So to our listeners out there, Go forth, be informed,
Yeah.
be mindful, and most importantly, be empowered. If you really want to go deep on this stuff, definitely check out Information Rules by Shapiro and Varian.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been an awesome deep dive, and we can't wait to do it again with another fascinating topic. Until next time.